Hi, I'm Jess Dewell, and I'm your host of the Voice of Bold Business Radio. I'm so glad to be here today with you on this program where we're talking about minimum viable product. And the reason we're talking about minimum viable product isn't because you're thinking about starting a business, isn't because you're thinking about starting a new product line or going into a new market. It's really because the ideals and the ideas behind a minimum viable product directly relate to what it takes to have a complete idea to bring to the table to earn our seat at the table within our business. So I can't wait to hear what Mark has to say when I ask him the question, and we're going to dive into a conversation after he answers this question from me. What is a minimum viable product idea? And why is it important to have all the parts in place before presenting and talking about it? Now, you can't hear the answer just yet because first I want to introduce you to Mark. He's been here before. You already know him. You'll recognize his voice. You'll recognize his mugshot on the video. Yet, I still want to make sure you know who he is and what he's about. Mark Carruthers is a change facilitator and has worked in 9 industries, including agriculture, construction, wholesale distribution, and high tech as an entrepreneur and an employee. You'll get to meet Mark right after this.
Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business, the show that provides everything smart leaders need to evaluate situations, build relationships, and create solutions. Jessica Dewell candidly talks about the skills necessary to build tenacity and do more with less. And now, here's Jessica.
For those of you who follow the whole alignment of planets and things, Mercury is in retrograde. And so for a lot of people that shows up as technology problems or issues. And here's the thing. That's been my story for a while. And sometimes, even with our best intentions and we know something's going to work, it doesn't. And we take it in stride. And that's something that I really am interested to see. How does creating a minimal viable product align with some of these other things, like taking it in stride, going with the flow, figuring out what we actually need to earn a seat at the table? So, Mark, I want to ask you, what is a minimum viable product or idea, and why is it important to have all the parts in place before presenting or talking about it with others?
Well, a minimum viable product or idea, or however you want to term it, is putting forth an initial idea, perhaps incomplete, but it's an initial step towards a product, a service, an idea that you hope will evolve into a full-fledged product, service, new idea within a business, an existing business. Certainly it falls into play with regards to startups and new businesses. The thing is that if people only enter into an idea or a product with a perfect idea and completion product, chances are it's going to fail because the person or the individual doesn't really know for certainty or with certainty what the final product is that the customer or your employer or whatever wants. If you start out with essentially a prototype product or idea and evolve it, iterate it into, or by steps, by phases, it may evolve into that final product that you envisioned, but it's not necessarily going to get you there at the onset. Sometimes a full-fledged product or service or idea is too much for the consumer, your employer, or whatever to buy into initially. But if you introduce the idea, concept, or product in small phases, and they like what they see initially, they're going to give you feedback to maybe enhance it, iterate it, make it better, and it grows on them as well as you, and you can evolve it into exactly what your customer or your employer wants. I think the whole idea is to present a minimum viable product that is still useful. It's got to be a quality idea or product, but not necessarily the finished, perfect product or idea. And usually, if you do it in stages, you can bring it in inexpensively, timely, and usually you will find out whether that idea will be bought into again by your customers or your employer or coworkers or partner or whatever it happens to be. by doing that, you get feedback, and that's the important thing on improving it.
Look at this, everybody. He came with a beginning and a middle and an end to his answer to this question. So he has just illustrated by answering this question what we are trying to do here in this program, which is let's have a beginning and a middle and an end. And Mark, one of the things that I really liked that you said, we can't have a perfect product before launch. Otherwise, we're guaranteed failure. I know that was the Jessica version of it, but that was the gist of it. Have you ever tried to have a perfect product that did fail, that you can share an experience, or worked with somebody who tried that?
Certainly, I have produced, I'll say, spreadsheets, analyses for my employers, for people, for clients that were very elaborate and so in depth that they really couldn't understand or comprehend it. And I had to scale it back to something that was understandable and basic, and then they would tell me, but can you do this? Or ask me, can you do this? Can you add this to it? And eventually it got to a final product, in the case of a spreadsheet or a financial analysis that they accepted and understood because it met their goals and objectives as opposed to what I was trying to give them initially.
We're talking about feedback. And so we're going to be navigating around this concept of what feedback is throughout the whole program. I'm thinking about communication, and I'm thinking about the necessity for clear communication. So I was in a room recently with several people. Something had happened. Okay. So there was this issue that needed to be resolved. And there was this, and it wasn't a confrontation, but it was definitely charged. There was a charged situation that I was sitting in, and I knew about what happened before. And I'm in this room, and somebody says whatever they needed to say. The person being talked to was different than the person who needed to actually hear it. So the wrong person was addressed. Are you following me so far? Am I making any sense? Do I have to give people fake names?
No, I understand perfectly well.
Okay.
And I've run into similar situations.
And then, so what ended up happening was everybody left. There was still a charged situation. It did not get resolved in that moment. And some things don't get resolved right away. So everybody went their separate ways, did their things, came back. Some came back. So this person who made this comment came back, and I'm in this room with them now. And I asked some questions and I got some clarification. And I said, do you know the person that you talked to about this was not the person that needed to have it addressed to them? Somebody else in the room needed to have that addressed with their name on it. This person who's in charge of this charged situation said, well, I said it once. Why can't everybody understand? I think it's real. And I think that person felt defensive. And I think that person felt like they were doing their best to communicate. But here's this thing. We're all just human. So when we say something and the impetus is that other people know what we're talking about, just by osmosis, if you will, being in the same room, recognizing, oh, that's supposed to be for me too. I think that's kind of like a far cry from good feedback loops.
If a person isn't aware that they are supposed to be paying attention, unfortunately, with all the distractions and other things on people's minds, they're not necessarily going to listen until you actually address them and almost grab them by the collar and say, hey, you're supposed to be listening to this. It just happens. Human nature, especially in long, boring meetings.
Yes.
You've got to be that the people who you're trying to convey something of importance to are actually paying attention.
Exactly. And that's the thing is, where are we making assumptions in this concept of having an idea that we want to be complete, a product concept that we want to be complete so it is accepted? I mean, one of the things that we were talking about before we started the program was there is this concept of I'm a great person and a great contributor when all I do is like throw up ideas all the time. There's an element of truth to that. However, what's that about? Who's really responsible for what comes next after the idea? And if we had that framework, if we had the middle and the concept of the end in mind, then not only would it be an idea that might be received, it's an idea that might actually get to completion. And we'll just use me or you, Mark, maybe we worked on it together. We come up with this idea and we share it. And now we have the ability to see it through to completion. So we're the ones that get the credit. We're the ones that get the influence and the result and the power that's associated with that on our career path.
It's got to have a starting place. And if you're, the first things you say or the first ideas are just sort of thrown away and the individuals stop listening, it's going nowhere. So you've got to have everybody on board, attention, getting their attentions. And sometimes it's just by starting with a simple idea as opposed to something that just, they say, is so far-fetched and considered to be irrelevant or too costly or whatever reasons they may dismiss it. That happens, and you've got to be able to get them to buy in. It's something that is going to be useful, practical, meets their goals, or solves a problem or something like that. And unless you catch their attention, it may go nowhere.
Catching attention is not by magic. It is not by hoping. It is by stepping up and saying, hey, I've got this idea. I'd like to run it by you. Let's see where the holes are. Give me some feedback so that I can keep working on this. And now with that, not only assertiveness that we can bring this idea forth, we can also then take the time to create an ally and buy in from somebody who is going to be weighing in or have influence over the final decision. Because if we've got their buy-in from the beginning, not only do we get mentored, learn how to navigate through different systems within our organization, we also know that when the time comes, it's going to be something that this person can stand behind, which means it's more likely that other people can also stand behind that.
Well, certainly, if you take a business in general or people you're working with, if you're just trying to stuff things down their throats or through them and get it done, you're not likely to get far. You have to have them feel like they are contributing and part of the solution to the problem. And there's a lot more buy-in that way, and they're more eager rather than feeling like you're forcing something upon them.
So let's talk about the beginning. So when we've got this idea and we think it's a great idea, and maybe we have 10 ideas and the 10 ideas are great ideas. So now we have the ideas. What do you think is the next step that we take to go, which one of these might actually turn into a product, something we can use in our organization to improve something, to add something new, whatever that is. What's that next step after having the idea to help qualify it?
You've got to have or figure out who it is who is going to benefit from these things, and make sure you've got the right customer. And I use customer because customer more often refers to external to a business. But when you're an individual in a business, your coworkers, your bosses, your supervisors, they're also your customers, and you're trying to get them to buy in to a product that is going to serve their needs, their goals, their objectives, their wishes, however you want to term it. You've got to make sure you've got the right people you're talking to, as you mentioned before, because if you're talking to the wrong people, you're not going to get anywhere, even though you've got a terrific idea. You've got to make sure you know what your customers are, again, internal or external, what they want, what they need, and that you're talking to the right people.
We quote unquote know who this is for, but how do we really know that we're including enough diversity in this second step, this deciding who are we talking to and the reasons we're talking to them?
Probably again by feedback, because if the person or persons who are involved in it initially that you've chosen thinking they are the right customers, the right individuals, aren't paying attention, don't really understand what you're trying to say, then they're probably not the right people. And you've got to ask them perhaps, well, I can see that you're not exactly enthralled with this. I don't know if it's the idea or just it should be directed to somebody else. And usually these people who you are answering to have an idea within the business who this might be pitched to. And you basically have to inquire, because there's no way to know exactly what the customer wants unless you talk to the customers. And you may be chasing the wrong people entirely. And so you've got to ask. This whole process is getting feedback from customers, whether it's external, internal, or wherever it is. You've got to get feedback and use that not only for product change, but on who you should be addressing it to.
I think the who is really important, and the underlying reasons why it's important to them. Does it just make their job easier? Does it make their life more productive? Does it, and the next part of that is, will they like using this or being a part of or contributing to this idea? And that by adding those extra caveats, it's almost, now we're going to go to total home base. We've been starting in our family at home, right? We have a 6-year-old first grader. What's it like to wear somebody else's shoes? So you don't like what somebody did. You get through the whole, right? You get through the whole thing. Something happened, blah, blah, blah. And this can happen in work too. I'm using Carter because it was just the other day. And Ryan sat him down and said, well, put yourself in that other person's shoes and listen to your side of the conversation. How did that make you feel? Did that make you feel good? Did that make you feel bad? And I'm bringing this up because, well, one, it goes back to the other example that I used from a conference room. And two, it's something that it's easy to overlook. We are going so fast, and we might look for feedback and we're like, oh, got it. Check the box, check the box, check the box. Yet, do we really have feedback? Did we really listen? Are we noticing what has been shared with us and incorporating it? Because this is where we get people who, you're talking about buy-in earlier. This is where we get the buy-in. We get the buy-in from thinking about people and what they might want and how they might want to receive it or participate in it before they're ever shown it. It shows a little bit of consideration.
Well, exactly. And it goes back to the idea of a prototype, whether it's an idea or a thought that you put down on paper, or whether it's the actual physical product that you're giving to them. Certainly with these 3D printers anymore, in the case of a physical product, you can create a prototype fairly quickly and easily, or get someone to create it with a 3D printer. Mm-hmm. And these whole ideas, if somebody sees something or sees where the advantage is going to be, or if you can prove to them, well, proof is in the pudding. It's what happens when it's all done. But if you can convince them that there will be proof that it's going to be beneficial to them and meet their needs, then you're going to get somewhere. Mm-hmm. Because you've got to convince them. You may be convinced yourself, but unless you're convincing the person or people you're talking to, whether it's an internal or external customer, you're going to get nowhere.
Right. So this moves us on to maybe we're around the third step. So we've got have the idea and know who, and then the second step, know who it's for and if they will actually use it. So this third step, you had talked about a prototype. So this prototype, this concept of whether it's a product or a service, an actual thing or a written out process. What does it look like? How does it feel? And what would the experience be for executing it, as well as being a recipient of the product, getting the product out there, and then of course using it in that form.
When you're the individual with the idea or the prototype and you've created this thing, you put forth how you think it might be used, what benefits it might create, but then ask the the individual you're trying to pitch it to about their thoughts and where they might be able to make suggestions for improvement, whether in a physical context or whether it's something in a functionality, whether it's an idea that they want to improve upon. And if they give you feedback again on how it could be better, we see what it is, we can kind of see your view, but we want to say this, or they're going to tell you, no, we don't like that, it should be this. And usually people, not always, but usually people, when they say no, they qualify it with, we think it should be this. That's still good feedback. Getting a no answer or a negative feedback is not bad. It's usually good to get you headed in the right direction with your idea, your prototype, into again, the product or service that is actually going to be of value to the person you're trying to sell it to.
Okay, and I want to stick with this no, because here, everybody, we've moved on to the equivalent of a fourth step, get feedback and really listen to the feedback. And this is the point. It's clear enough through the first three steps that there is something to share, to give, to make, and it's being qualified. So when it starts being shared with the ultimate decision makers, this concept, this idea, this product, then what happens? What happens is I love that you said no is a great answer, Mark, because especially when it's qualified. When it's qualified, we know we have some sort of buy-in. We know we have some sort of interest. We just know there's more work to be done. And maybe it's to challenge us to step up. How far will we go? Maybe it's because nobody else really knows. They just know it's not right yet. And that's okay too, because that's where we as individuals, whether we are having leadership, okay, I'm going to use the word leadership here purposefully, can continue to use our skills to drive change, to drive addition. Now that's different than being a leader, looking at this idea from somebody and making sure to say no. And here's the reason. This is what we're looking for. Or what if this? is more appealing to the big strategy that we're going down. So we have a responsibility as a leader as well to communicate effectively as part of that feedback process, because somebody's going out on a limb to come up with an idea, to put some feedback together, to do some research, to make a presentation, and to share it that has a complete beginning, middle, and an end, so that, and I say a beginning, middle, and end of an idea, so that the actual product creation, the actual process creation, the actual thing that is being presented can go get done.
Oh, exactly. One of the things that I read and even and listened to, and actually one of the they talked about, is something that I heard several years ago from an MBA student. And they talked about the idea of when you get feedback, then you either got to pivot and change your direction entirely, or persevere through the idea and concept because you've just been given changes. The pivot is a total reversal and change, whereas the persevere is, okay, you're on the right track, keep moving that way, and your feedback for a change will, at least you'll get an idea that you're moving in the right direction. Otherwise, you pivot and backtrack entirely and start in a different direction because your feedback is telling you, no, that's not what we wanted. You didn't understand. And you go, fine, then how about this? And you change direction entirely. As long as you're meeting the needs or wants of your customer, that's the whole objective and what we're trying to do when we're setting up with a minimum viable product. You've got an idea and you're trying to get it through to completion based on your knowledge, but your knowledge of what your client wants or needs won't necessarily be complete because you're not your client. It's you, it's your idea. You just think this is what it should be. If you're just working on producing a product based on what you think they want without any feedback, it's probably not the same as the mass market. So you're an individual and you have your own ideas, and you have to be able to either persevere with what you've got or pivot and change direction to get where you want to go.
You are listening to Voice of Bold Business Radio. This is program 111, where we're talking minimum viable product. And what Mark was just sharing with us is so true. And Mark, I want to stick with the word pivot for a minute, because I think pivoting is great for individuals and small teams, whereas pivoting as a company is never really fast and it requires a lot of change. And so when we have a culture and we have established a process that encourages people to come up with ideas and share them once they have core pieces in place to be able to evaluate, does it fit now? Does it fit later? It might not fit at all. And being able to know those things helps people develop their own personal skills, have the courage to step up. Because if all we have is ideas and we're always told no, or we always have ideas, and then what about somebody else hears that idea and says, that's a really good idea. I'm going to go do the viable product piece around this to get it implemented. Who gets the credit? Not me with the idea, the person who actually put the thought into it. And that's something I really want to put forward, because we're in this place where everybody wants to give their advice, but nobody wants to actually do work anywhere. And I am making a big, broad, general statement. Overall, I run into that a lot. Is, oh, well, I just want to give people my advice and I want to lead people and I want to hold them close. And I'm like, well, where's the work? Oh, it's holding the people close. And I said, yes. And you're modeling. So if you're creating a space for people to work within and they're doing all the work and people are watching you, watch them do the work, what happens? They're going to want to be like you and they're not going to do the work. You're setting the example by just being the way you're being. So what work is being done at every level? And so we can make changes for ourselves. I'm going to go back to this. We can make changes for ourselves by having complete ideas. We will get recognition. We will be seen. And knowing that we all have our own background and experience and goals, now other people are going to start to see how we can bring our background, our experience, and our goals and add more value. We already have value. Our employers, our companies see us as having value. We're there. We've made the agreement to be there.
Hopefully there is some value, or at least the individual who is an employee senses there is value, because if there's at some point in time that the individual does not perceive that they're being valued, that can have a very detrimental impact on what is or should be a business's most valuable asset, which are the people themselves. And if the people themselves are, as you said, being told no, or their ideas are being ignored, or what have you, then you are really doing a lot of damage potentially to your most valuable asset. There's nothing worse than hiring a smart person and then not utilizing their skill set, as it will usually drive them away, and they'll go on to somewhere where they perceive that they are being valued and contributing.
Everything that you said is exactly right, Mark. And so as an organization, what we must do is create a space where people want to show up, and create a space to people so people know what's expected. They know what's expected for a good idea to be even considered. Then through that consideration process, what does the consideration process look like, and what type of feedback will be given, and what type of response is necessary? I have people who are like, sure, somebody wants to go work on this, so I'm going to go let them work on this. And they're small companies. They're less than 100 people. And somebody's spending all their time on this new idea instead of on the job that needs to be done to keep the business going, and something gets left behind. And, I am all about innovation. I am all about new ideas. If a new idea, though, is outside the scope of where the strategy has been set, what the direction is that the company is going, no is a good answer. It means the person at the end of that, doing all that work, isn't being told no after it's all done. They're being told, this, you know what, this is a good idea. It doesn't fit with us right now. And so what's the process for that? There is and it's hard to say no to people. It's hard to say not right now. It's hard to say it's outside the scope of what we want to do. And the reason it's hard is because we don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. And it's also hard because apparently the culture is not clear enough. The processes, the agreements, how things work between people day to day are not clear enough for somebody to have to be told no. I mean, if somebody has this crazy revolutionary idea once a week and they go through this and they get told no after no after no, that person's going to burn out and they're not going to share their ideas anymore. After one or two, it's like, oh, this person has great ideas. How can I, leader, how can I help this person channel them in my strategy? I must not be communicating our strategy very clearly. There must be more information that I can provide to help this person with all these ideas get on track for right now and have some successes just getting ideas that fit within the business today. I mean, that's something that we could even work on as thinking about this concept of minimum viable product, minimum viable idea. What is our responsibility as a leader to talk about what that is? What is our expectation? What is the path?
Certainly, if the leader is not giving an idea or conveying and communicating to the people within the company, subordinates, if you wish to use that term, then that's part of the overall corporate communication issue that some companies certainly have. And that leads to dissension, lack of morale, all sorts of issues. Now, you were mentioning an individual or someone who maybe comes into a business and comes up with a great idea and they present it. I think of a case where a young lady came to our business and she had this wonderful idea. She was new. She didn't understand all the things that had happened in the past. And it was actually an idea that we had thought of and tried, and it failed because she didn't. It sounded like a great idea. It had been tried once upon a time, and we had to tell her, sorry, unfortunately, this has been tried and it didn't work because of this and this and this and this. Unfortunately, some people are fragile, I'll call it, and they get upset with being told no. So that's one of the things, again, human nature that you have to try to deal with on an ongoing basis. It's challenging, it's difficult. Dealing with people in general is very challenging in this day and age. And I don't know how you overcome that, because I guess perhaps from an older generation, I understood getting told no or what have you, but I don't take it personally. I go, okay, well then is there something else? Is there, if I got told no, I'd say why, or what can I do, or why am I on the wrong path? How do I change what I did, or is that even feasible? And I'd start over again with still ideas. The only problem is you don't want to curtail creativity in people and have them stop bringing forth ideas. And that's the difficult challenge with telling people no.
I think it's interesting that you said, I would always ask. when I got told no, I would ask a question. I think that's brilliant. We're expecting people to give us everything, and we have to stand up for ourselves. We must say, okay, I'm told no. Do I feel like I have a reason? So if you got told no and you got the reason, if it was unclear, would you ask another question? That's really not clear to me. Can you give me more?
I certainly do.
You do? Okay, good. See, good. That's what I wanted.
You've read my article on questions.
Yes, I know. And there's always good questions and next questions. We're also in this place of we're magically expecting people to just tell us exactly what we need. And your initiative to ask a question is impressive and it's a little bit unique. So being able, and maybe, I mean, this is what I run into sometimes when people are speaking to me, even on my team, it's they actually ask qualifying questions they learned because I think I'm communicating clearly. And we've had enough bumps in the road that I try and over communicate sometimes, yet it's still not clear and it hasn't penetrated the way that the way that we can make sure that we're all on the same page. And so I happen to want questions. I happen to be working on how do I be more clear? I happen to be working on what is the right concise, am I being concise enough in my answer? And I think that's really what it comes down to. I think all the information I want to convey is there. It may just not be as clear as it needs to be. So thinking from the position of decision maker, business owner, board member, whatever position we happen to be in when we have this role of leader and this accountability and responsibility to do something with it, is to work on our own clarity in responding and make sure that we continue a conversation. Saying no without qualification is definitely okay. And there's a time and a place for that. Yet when we're developing our people, when we are developing something and allowing them to understand how our business works, the reasons behind what we do, why we do what we do, allows somebody who wants to be disruptive or come up with a different idea. And going back to your example of the young woman who was told no because then it was tried this way, and this way. Well, so, if it were me being that young girl, I'm like you, Mark, I would have said, so I will take back the reasons it did not work and let me work on those some more and see if the situation is different now. And then here I go. I got my qualifier. It's no right now, and we don't think it works, which could be considered sometimes as an old paradigm. We have to challenge what we've always done or what didn't work in the past. And it's up to us who has the idea, who is tasked with the idea, who accepts the idea to develop and move forward into a product or service or process to really investigate and know what didn't work last time. Because now you know what not to try. We can only get better from the work of those before us.
When I was a child and I'd ask my father, why am I being told to this, or why not? Why can't I do this? And he'd say, because I told you so. There are a lot of so-called leaders who have this because I told you so attitude, and they don't feel that they don't have to explain the whys or the why nots, the reason behind their no. And that is, I think, a flaw in some of those people who call themselves leaders, but they're out there. And this is part of what has to change and what is changing. People always talk about the challenges of one generation, an older generation having to speak to millennials. Well, generally millennials want to know why and what they can contribute instead of just being told by the old people in the business. And this is why perhaps millennials are a challenge to some on how to get the most out of them.
Well, shoot, I fall on the cusp of that. And I definitely have traits of both X and Y. So I get it. And it's interesting because why matters, yet why is such a subjective question. If I get told as the leader of an organization why, I really have to stop myself because my initial response is to give my personal why, subjectively from my perspective. Yet from an organizational standpoint, the question of why may still be relevant, yet I encourage what questions. So, or where questions or when questions or something like that instead of why. Why is too broad. And it leaves it up to the person answering to pick a place. And it may not be the right place. And it actually may create a larger gap in communication instead of bringing each other together. So I try and avoid those why questions about, I don't want to say little things because they're important things. When somebody has to be told no in business, or when we have to make a decision as an organization that is going to affect our market position, that's a big part of our why. And there's going to be these voices and actual people that are going to be like, what are you thinking? And internally, did we make the right choice? Did we make the right choice? Notice neither one of those are whys, but the choice directly relates to the why, the reason, the existence of the company in the first place. And so I'm a big proponent of, well, ask the question you want to ask. Why is too general? That puts the responsibility on the person answering. And if you're the one that's inquiring about something, can you be more specific?
Why is often perceived as a challenge, or why or why.
Be. I actually react that way. I get defensive. I will be completely honest. And that has to do with my conditioning and the way that I was raised. And I'm like, it doesn't really serve me. It takes a while to change it from a challenge to not be defensive with that.
Well, a why is almost like a text message where perception of tone and all the rest of it and how it's being said becomes fact, whether it is fact or not. But when perception becomes fact, that's when things get really dangerous.
Mm-hmm. Right. And now we've been noticed, you guys, and I'm saying stuck, but I think we're purposefully staying right here in this concept of feedback and the importance of feedback within taking an idea to make a product or a service or a process and actually get it to something that can be evaluated by the company to find out if it's the right time and the right idea and move forward or not. And an or not is an okay thing with enough knowledge given to the people that came up with the idea so that they can keep working. Maybe it's close, maybe it's the wrong time. Maybe it's not quite the right vein, and it just takes a little bit of shaping and guiding. And that's where this concept of, leadership within a leading or a leader position is really necessary. And they really do dovetail each other.
Well, it's quite interesting because what you made me think of was in the year 2000, just as the millennium or the century turned, 1999, 2000, I was working for a business that was acquired by a U.S. company that was offering what is effectively now known as cloud computing. But in the year 1999, 2000, it was so far ahead of its time, it was the wrong time, and that U.S. company actually failed. It was ahead of its time. Cloud computing is the big thing now. And then, it was supposedly a finished product and ready to go and should have been what the customers and what business wanted, and the timing was wrong. And that was unfortunate because it's exactly what is being sold and utilized today, but it was 15 years too early.
There's so many things to keep the pulse of. And regardless of our position, regardless of the way that we're showing up, we want to be useful. I think we can all agree we want to be useful in the work that we do. We want it to be fulfilling in a way that makes us feel good in our hearts and our souls, in addition to actually doing something that is useful for another person or another company. We feel like we have to set that aside in business. And I don't think we do. I think that taking the time to think through something actually brings our heart and soul along, and maybe can even be more information that we have for proposing an idea in the first place can come to light, because we're not just giving an idea and throwing it out there. We're thinking about it. We're considering it. We're figuring out how it works. And we may not figure out how it works, but we may figure out enough of why it keeps coming up for us and the reasons behind the fact it's a solution that we want to present that will guide us on other people, getting feedback from other people in the organization, right? Our customers and the decision makers in the end, to help us get to where we want to go, and asking for that help.
Generally, entrepreneurs, they have this great idea that they think will fulfill the wants and needs of potential customers, with the whole idea that we're going to have something really good come from this, and usually lots of money and instantly. But if they don't get the right feedback, it doesn't take off, they're hurt. But the whole concept of entrepreneurship is that someone has a product or a service that they think is going to be of benefit and beneficial to a whole lot of customers, and still make them a lot of money too.
Mm-hmm. You want to hear something funny? Before social media became big time, right? Before we had platforms where we could share stories, have our legacy, put all this stuff online, I had this brilliant idea. I had this brilliant idea for this website called Biped Bios. And it was all about having this legacy concept of these stories of our lives that people could come put about us randomly and maybe anonymously in such a way that you could get this, like a biography of a person that you would pick up in the store and read. I even programmed it. Okay, I'm not a programmer, but I even programmed the database. I had it all ready to go. And I was talking to people about it, and everybody thought I was crazy. They were like, why would people want to put their whole stories online? Why would they be interested in any of that kind of stuff? Why would they? And I'm thinking, well, genealogy sites are really big and people are taking all of these home videos. Why wouldn't we have a written story, have this oral tradition included into these other mediums? And now here comes social media.
Exactly. Sounds like Facebook to me.
Well, what's funny is it was not quite like that because it wasn't supposed to be a community thing. It was just come talk about, it was to create biographies for other people and create their legacy. But it was a stepping stone toward that. And knowing that I had that idea and somebody else had that idea and somebody else had that idea and a lot of them failed. They never went anywhere. What's even funnier is I think my logo was a dinosaur, which makes no sense. Anyway, that was a long time ago. But you're right. The things that happened before their time. And here's the deal. The reason we have what we have today is in part because of the idea I had, the work I did, the prototype I put together. Who knows? Somebody may have seen it. But the thing is, we are all connected and there's this larger consciousness at work here. So there were easily 150 or maybe even thousands of people who had a similar idea. And it was through all the iterations of what wasn't going to work or how to use the technology or how to hop on the bandwagon in such a way that we could jump on technology as it was occurring. That's where the idea is going to win. And here's Facebook. And, I think it's fabulous. I think it's fabulous that there were who knows how many failures before that to get there.
Well, you're sitting there and you're saying that you had this idea and had you carried forward with it, you could have been the inventor of Facebook.
I could not have ever been that, and I will not ever.
But I also had a product that I was upgrading this year, and the product is something that I use and find very valuable. And actually, I had I'll call it the originator of the idea in 1982 that I presented and to somebody else, and they thought it was a great idea, and I actually proved the financial institution wrong in their calculations. And now somebody's making huge money on interest calculations and time value of money and lease payments and all the rest of it. And I did it in 1982. And like I said, I proved a financial institution wrong because I did this little calculation and at that time, Lotus 123. And I wish I had run with it and now had created this wonderful software that I use and value.
You wish. I don't wish. I'm glad it failed because it was not what I was supposed to be doing. There's the other piece of this. Is that failure shifted my attention into a realm that was much more in line with how I could support people, help them create their stories, be connected to other people, and deepen communication. So here's where we're at. And I'm going to do a quick recap because we are coming to the end of our show, Mark. Is there anything else that you want to say before I do the recap?
There are so many startups and entrepreneurs that fail. It's a large percentage. When it really comes down to it, the net, in a 5-year period, is only a third of them actually fail. Only 50% remain, but only a third actually fail. And in order, a lot of them fail because they didn't do a minimal viable product, and they just ran out of money because they tried to become perfect and they wanted to do that. And it's the same idea in current business, in current operations, where if you don't essentially throw out an MVP, then you may fail, and your whole, what was a good idea goes nowhere and it benefits nobody. And that's so important for entrepreneurs and startups and that sort of thing, because there are so many great ideas and great people that can, do something for individuals, other individuals, or society perhaps, and they just go nowhere because they haven't taken it slowly. They've tried to become perfect, and that's a shame. And I certainly hope that young aspiring entrepreneurs consider minimum viable products in their startups and take it a little slower to become a millionaire, multimillionaire, and achieve what they're hoping for because it's really sad to have businesses fail and aspirations quashed. And like I said, I'd take it back to the startups and the entrepreneurs.
Thank you, Mark. So here you have it. In the end, we're talking about entrepreneurship, we're talking about new products, we're talking about existing business, and we're talking about the importance of feedback, what it means to have something that is minimally viable in such a way that others can buy in, provide feedback, and continue to build out that concept to a product idea process, and get what needs to be out into the world. Thank you for watching today. Don't forget to subscribe. You've got iTunes, you've got YouTube, you've got Stitcher. I mean, come on, go click the button, have us delivered directly to your inbox or listening queue every Tuesday and Friday that we have a show. I have to admit, it's super easy. Plus, we all know, all of you out there, if you have questions about what other pieces might be included in a minimum viable product, do you have questions about the structure, if so, what's missing because something you have isn't taking off, put them in the comments. Mark and I will be watching. We will have the conversation with you because it's a skill. Building a minimum viable idea and how to incorporate the feedback piece to continue to develop that's the skill right there, the feedback. So let's practice that skill. Come on, talk to me and talk to Mark, and you will get the information you need, the practice that you want, and some guidance to help you get where you want to go. We'd gladly be honest with you. You're going to find all the program notes today at voiceofboldbusiness.com/P111. That is voiceofboldbusiness.com/P for program 111. You can also search for Mark. You can also search for minimum viable product. I have to admit, this was a really cool show, and I didn't want to stop talking about it because I have other failures I wanted to share, even though they were good ideas. And I also have other successes that I wanted to share that were good ideas. And so we've got to keep this conversation going, and you've got yours. Make sure that you're sharing your experience. Make sure you share what works. Make sure you share and talk to people about what didn't work. It's those experiences that shape what being a leader today is, being an effective leader. So thank you very much. And don't forget, bring every part of an idea to the table to increase buy-in. It must include the elements for a minimum viable product.
Subscribe at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com and get more information, program notes, and past episodes. Bold leaders approach each situation and focus on action to achieve a higher level of leadership. Jessica Dewell, your business advocate, is the host of the Voice of Bold Business Radio. Thank you for joining us.